What's up, YouTube? Murphy Firearms Training. I am here to talk about loading Magnum revolver rounds, Magnum handguns. And this is also actually true for Magnum rifles, but specifically I'm going to focus on Magnum handguns. And I want to talk about a couple of things with some close-ups here. The first thing is someone saw me shooting my 460 Smith & Wesson. I've got two different hand loads here. And they made the comment that I didn't seat the bullets all the way and that I'm an idiot and that I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. Well, I don't profess to know it all, and maybe I am an idiot. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. But let me show you why I do what I do, and you be your own judge. Okay? So, the 460 Smith & Wesson, my reloading manual here, shows a maximum overall length of 2.290. 2.290. This means any longer than this, and it may not fit in the cylinder. Okay? So that's kind of your maximum length. You want to be that long or shorter. And then when you look at a specific load, over here it says minimum overall length. And you'll have, depending on what bullet you're using, what that minimum overall length is. And so I'm going to go to specifically this guy right here, 300 grain XTP. That would be this 300 grain XTP. This 300 grain XTP for almost every powder, there's a couple that show 2.150, but for most of the powders, and the powder I used was Ogden Little Gun, it shows a maximum overall length of 2.160. Okay, excuse me, minimum overall length of 2.160 for Ogden Little Gun. If I go down to that crimp groove there to make my ammo look pretty, I am below this minimum overall length. Please, 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 if you are new to loading Magnum handguns, do not go shorter than this minimum overall length shown in your loading manual. This is here because if you go any shorter, you can take up some powder space or compress a charge. And if you take up some of the powder space with the bullet or compress the charge, sometimes pressures do weird things. So unless you have a pressure barrel and can pressure test a shorter cartridge, it is a very, very bad idea to go shorter than this minimum overall length that's shown in your reloading manual. Okay, these cartridges operate well into the 50s, sometimes into the 60,000. This has a maximum, a SAMI maximum of 62,000 psi. When you're dealing with those kind of pressures in a handgun, you absolutely do not want to seat your bullet shorter than this manual says, because you can get a pressure spike. And you've got to think, when you're dealing with 55, 56,000, in this case 53.6, or if you use H110, 56.1, 296, 56.1, 42.27, 57,000 psi, a 10% change in pressure is almost 6,000 psi. A 10% change in pressure can put you over the SAMI maximum. That's dangerous for you and everybody around you. So anyway, that's the first thing, is that someone saw my reloads and they said I didn't seat my bullets deep enough and I'm an idiot. So that's the first thing, okay? You do you, but I know my cartridges are safe. Now, the other two things I want to talk to you about don't involve this loading manual, so I'm going to take it out of the way. And I want to talk about two other things to be aware of as a reloader, other than making sure you start below the maximum and work up with test loads. But when you're reloading, two things you need to remember about a Magnum revolver is, number one, you better have a good crimp die. I strongly recommend the Lee factory crimp die for handguns. If you look at this, you can see this case mouth is really bit into this bullet. In a 5 or 6 shot revolver that shoots something this powerful, a lot of times as you shoot, the actual recoil works like a kinetic bullet puller. And in 3, 4, 5 shots, a lot of times if you don't have a good strong crimp, these bullets do a thing, it's called jumping crimp, and they actually get longer. And folks, if your bullet starts to sneak out of your case under recoil, after 3 or 4 rounds, it can tie your revolver up to the point where you have to open it and unload it. So be aware of that. It's called crimp jump, or jumping the crimp. And a lot of times, if you're just using a standard roll crimp, it is not going to get enough crimp, especially on jacketed bullets. It is not going to get enough crimp to hold that bullet in place. That's why I recommend a separate crimp die. If you are using a roll crimp, and some brands have a better roll crimp than others, if you're using a roll crimp, I like to seat my bullet as one operation and then come back and crimp it as a separate operation, and I tend to get a better crimp that way. So, but these are both crimped using the Lee factory crimp die, and you can see, I mean, that thing's in there really solid. If I were to give you this and put it in a kinetic bullet puller, you'd have a hard time pulling these bullets. It really, really bites onto them well. It also gives you more consistent velocity with Magnum revolvers, but more importantly, it doesn't tie up your cylinder and you don't get crimp jump. Now, the other thing I want to mention is a lot of people get into reloading, and they're reloading 9 mils and 38 specials, and these kind of run-of-the-mill cases, and you know, they don't do things right, and it's no big deal. But when you're priming Magnum revolvers, I'm just going to say to you guys, make sure, if you look at my primers, they are just ever so slightly below flush. I mean, if you run your finger over it, you can actually feel it's just below flush. You measure it with a caliper, it's 1/1000th to even 1/2 below flush, but that primer is below this case head. Do not ever leave a Magnum revolver or a Magnum rifle, a high recoil firearm. Do not ever leave your primer above the case head. When I was learning how to reload, someone said, don't make your primers stand proud. Okay, so they shouldn't stick up above the case head. And the reason for that is if that primer's sticking up just a little bit, and you've got a cylinder full of rounds, under recoil, these can rattle back and forth. And if that primer's sitting proud and you get firm enough recoil, the back plate of the revolver could possibly set this off. Now, how rare is that? It's pretty rare. But I want you to think about a revolver. If you've got a revolver and this is not lined up with the barrel and it rattles onto the back plate of the cylinder and sets off, what's it going to do to that gun? Most Magnum revolvers are very expensive firearms. Something as simple as not seating your primers can blow up a very expensive firearm. So something I want you guys to think about. So make sure your ammo's in spec. Get a good tight crimp so you don't get crimp jump. And make sure your primers are seated below flush. Okay, those are all such important things. And really, you should be doing these with all of your ammo, but it's so much more important when you're dealing with these rounds that operate at 60,000+ PSI and generate massive amounts of recoil. The last thing I will leave you with, guys, is the whole crimp jump thing. You know, I've seen people who, you know, they're just loading target ammo and they say, well, if I get crimp jump, I'll just pull the bullets and reload them. It's no big deal. But if you're carrying this for self-defense from something like bear, you definitely want to test your ammo and make sure crimp jump is not an issue, because what you would really hate to have happen is I have actually seen these with a poor enough crimp that after 2 shots, the cylinder was tied up. And so you've got a 5 or 6 shot revolver that after 2 shots, the cylinder's tied up. The other thing I will add is crimp jump is more likely in snub nose or scandium frame like 44 Magnum airweight. Smith makes a 329 PD. It's a scandium frame 44 Magnum. They make a 340 and a 360, 357 Magnum airweight. The Ruger Alaskan 454 snub nose. Because those guns are so small and so light for such a powerful cartridge, they're very snappy. And the snappier the recoil, the more likely you are to get crimp jump. So do keep that in mind. So anyway, guys, I hope this was helpful if you're out there loading big bore cartridges. It is a lot of fun. It saves you a ton of money. And it's really rewarding to take something you made, take it to the range, and blow stuff up with it. So, but do be safe out there. And if you have questions, I would love to try to answer them. I hope this is informative. I hope it helps you. Please like and subscribe. We appreciate your support. And let us know if we can do anything for you.